Some people look at the world from a microscope, others from a telescope. You decide what you do. You can be rich, you can live longer, you can fly to the moon, whatever you want to do. Don't deliver bad presentations. Your fashion, your appearance communicates, whether you like it or not. When I always get to hear that we're all the same, I think that's almost stupid to say.
Welcome to the talk. I'm your host, Usi and today I have my guest, Flo, a communication specialist, coach, storyteller, Toastmaster, and everything above and beyond. Thank you for coming today, and let's start talking. Because
Let's
that's
talk.
what you do for a living, right?
That's what I do for a living, and that's also what we're here for.
Amazing. Flo, I was thinking, how important is the message itself, or how important is the messenger who delivers it? Because today we see some very stupid ideas coming from very big names and big mouths, and we saw people dive into the ocean and die because of some promises, some message, some story. We saw billions lost, and sometimes we hear great ideas from people that we don't pay attention just because we don't know who they are or how important they are for our lives.
Well, I know that what you would like to hear right now is here's a bulletproof recipe. This is how the values are, how important is the message, and how important is the messenger. In my opinion and in my experience, it is always situational. It always depends. Because I give you a few examples. Think about how important is the message. Think about Stephen Hawking. I mean, great mind. But if you think about his speaking abilities, did he have any delivery? Did he have any body language, any voice modulation, any of that? No, right? But his content is world class and it has inspired millions. But it's just message. And if you look at many other examples in business, we see how important the message and the content is. Now, let's look at a few other examples. You know that other people, they have just delivery. I mean, let's use a bad example, like a Donald Trump. I mean, there's just a bad delivery, but somehow this delivery engages people, and his messages are sometimes just fluff. But because of who he is and how he speaks and how he also gets his messages across very often, that's how he attracts people as well. Because his messages, clearly, if you want to dig deeper, there's nothing. It's just fluff. So therefore, what you can see is it depends. And give you a more solid example about the messenger. You are also really heavily involved in the startup world. Exactly. So let's look at pitches. I work right now with a company in Germany where we do AI voice profiles. We look at pitches. They looked at pitches from Shark Tank, and they said, now, if we just listen to the voice, not the content, do you think we can tell whether somebody will get investment, yes or no? What do you think? Just the voice, no content.
No content, I don't believe.
Well, with 60 to 80% probability, the software can tell whether somebody gets the money or not. And also in another big entrepreneur...
Is it based on someone is trustworthy or not, someone was confident or not? Like, what is the metric that we measure?
So they base it on a charisma score, but when you look at what does a voice transport, the voice transports confidence. The voice transports competence and also the passion. And what does that leave with the audience? What does it give the audience? Well, it gives the audience that trust, it gives the audience that passion and that motivation that they can do it with you. And that's why it's a really important tool. And really another interesting fact that I saw and an interesting case study was from an entrepreneurship conference in Germany, Bits and Pretzels, one of my favorite ones, really good one. And there they had a pitching competition last year. Now, in the audience is a communication coach, a friend of mine. He listened to all the pitches and then he goes like, that guy's gonna win. And it was the winner. Again, and he comes from a theater background, so he looks a lot at delivery. And because the delivery is on point, it happens. So message, messenger, it always depends. But of course, your content has to be solid and it has to be good.
Then you need a charisma like a Barack Obama, right? You have a good message, you are a great delivery. He was one of the greats, I think speechwriters and delivery. That's how he captivated all of us, I think, our hearts together. And we were talking about startups and pitches winning, and unfortunately, there were stories of Sam Bankman, Elizabeth Holmes, and many other people in the industry who scammed literally, or famous Netflix series of Anna Delvey, where storytelling and little bit presentation, not only like oral presentation, but like faking the entire lifestyle, social status. And today we see all over the social media how, especially in this country, like people in Dubai with all this luxury showcasing, faking the success. Like, how does that storytelling and faking does justice? Because some people do fake who they are, but they are not actually.
That's very true.
And they kind of only the story is there.
Absolutely. The story is there. And then I would say it's not only the story, but basically they create this vision. They create these possibilities for people with their messages. And the messages are very often common stories that you can be rich, you can live longer, you can fly to the moon, whatever you want to do. And because they say it so well, and from a content point of view, very often only, you believe it, right? And then they invest in good copywriting, they invest in nice visuals and in great videography. And that's why people go like, yeah, I think I should give you my money. But then, of course, the money goes into their pocket and the poor people never see a single penny. But it's not the right approach, right? Nobody should do that, taking advantage. But it's actually not that difficult if you think about it, no? You need a good copywriter. You need the right mix, and then you can create a story that just blows someone's mind.
I think like historically, like great stories captivated people. Like almost all religious texts are based on that stories.
Yeah.
And communication from, I don't know, Mesopotamians to Assyrians to ancient Egypt, Greek philosophy, all of them have this.
To the caves, the paintings on the wall, that's all stories, right? And you know what I find fascinating about stories? If you think about what do you do at night when you dream?
I read this article. Apparently, half of our brain tricks out the other half of our brain or entertains it by telling the story, which is a dream.
Yeah. It's true, right? Our brain works in stories, and whether you sleep and you have these mini episodes that somehow doesn't make really sense, but these are stories. And if you look at also what happens when you listen to a story in your brain, how much you can feel for another person, the fact even that neurotransmitters can be released into your bloodstream just by listening to a story, it shows you how powerful this communication tool is. So therefore, it can be unfortunately also abused.
Like, don't you think with this like social media virality aspect, all these stories kind of became very similar? And at some point, it was even like a joke topic on LinkedIn where you hear these stories like, oh, someone was late to the interview, but I hired them, they became this, or I don't know, I couldn't find a parking, or I helped someone suffering, I was late to the interview, but I got the job because the suffering person was the interviewer. Like, and we saw this post becoming viral, but the same storyline, same things, maybe something was changed or not, but or another important, I think the ugliest thing ever taking advantage of people was like, oh, I'm hiring XX positions in XX's places, comment interested, I will check your profile. They never did, there was never a job, but that post will go viral and these people will gain hundreds of followers.
Absolutely. But then again, right, it's that hope that you can get something. That's definitely what it happens. But overall, I fully agree. People use frameworks, they use scripts, and therefore a lot of stories are very similar that you see in social media and the online world, which I don't find very entertaining or very powerful. Sometimes it's just sad. It's just sad.
But don't you think like now with ChatGPT, AI, people, asking prompts, getting things ready, there will be no original story left?
Yes and no. So I would say you can use ChatGPT to create really original, amazing stories. But, and this is the big but, if you just go ahead, write the best prompt in the world and feed it with information, go like, oh, thanks ChatGPT, this is the story, I'm done. Then of course, if everybody does that, every story will be more or less the same, because there's the same logic behind, even though there's a wide amount of data that's being fed into, you just do copy and paste. We talked about that earlier, right? It's the copy and paste, and eventually everybody does the same. However, now if you go brief ChatGPT, you get a first story outline, you look at it, and then you can either go back to ChatGPT and say, like, change this, do this. I want a different character. I want this. Then you make it your own together with ChatGPT, or you then even refine it by yourself. And this, I think, is where the big difference is. You just take and put it out, or do you really make it your own and make it better? And this is for me where even with AI, you have fantastic tools where you can create outstanding stories, but you have to put in the work. You still have to put in the work.
You definitely still need to put in the work, but I was thinking, like, for example, today you want to apply for a job.
Mm-hmm.
You take that job description, you feed it to the AI and tell, write me a perfect CV that matches that job description. You can definitely do that, right? And then
Absolutely.
you'll become this perfect story on a paper.
It will.
And if everyone does it, how do you understand who is an actual talent? Because everyone had the same story, the same thing with the LinkedIn, the same like get rich schemas on TikTok.
Well, how will you detect whether somebody knows exactly what they talk about, or if it's just a CV, or if it's just one story, one snapshot here? It's very difficult from just reading and maybe even through the delivery. Most likely, you won't be able to understand that. But that's only then when you again have to dig deeper. You have to do the work. You have to maybe challenge people. You have to ask them. Then you can understand. If you but and also I would say if you listen very carefully, if you say somebody is performing a piece of content that is written by ChatGPT, now the language will be never 100%. The words that they use, the sentences, maybe somebody does mistakes which ChatGPT wouldn't. So therefore, it's never going to be 100% them. So if you look at content before and after, maybe you can detect that something is a little bit off here. It sounds really good, it makes sense, it's powerful, but maybe it's not 100% you. And that's where you could understand it.
But like, where you become you then? Like, we talked about the importance of delivery, and you mentioned that like you coach entrepreneurs, startup people, people who are looking for funding, who got funding, who are looking for clients, and everyone needs to tell a story, right? Like, where that uniqueness come? We discussed about the importance of the story. We discussed about the importance of delivery, and what else is important in there?
Well, we touched on the importance of delivery. I will say actually delivery is so important because your story is of course a big part of it, but why do I invest in you and not in the person next to you? Because I trust that you will spend your nights up and down and work 24/7, and that if something goes wrong that you'll find a way, and that's why I trust you, right? And that's of course more transported through your delivery than just through the content. So many people have great content, and when I coach people, we really spend a lot of time on delivery, and it's not just voice and body language. There's also things like you being able to show the world really who you are, show your authenticity, which is not easy. I mean, I can only tell from my experience, it takes a long time, and even sometimes I go like, should I really do that? But then when you try things out in front of audiences, actually very often they work because when you really show the world who you are, you create trust on another level. And that's also what you have to coach to people, because if you think about business, in school, we're not really trained to be authentic, right? We're trained to deliver content. We're trained to just give content and ideas and materials out. So therefore, showing the world really who you are is a huge part of successful communication. And therefore, that's also where you have to train people and doing more, right? If you think about the wow factor, that also can come in your delivery and in your content. And again, many pitches, many presentations, they just focus on the content, but they forget that maybe we need a bit of human connection. Maybe we need a bit of entertainment value to make it better. And that's what I coach people on.
That's great. At university, I took classes from Stephen Kruppen, who was the Barack Obama speechwriter, and he definitely was talking about and opened my eyes to the whole new industry of like writing speeches and putting that right message, where mainly politicians and CEOs, they only have to master how to deliver, and also most politicians, when they do these big rallies, they use teleprompters, and all they have to do that perfect delivery. It's like literally like an act. It's like a theater act kind of a moment where you go, you perform. It's written by someone else. Definitely, it has your voice and your vision, but like the story is built for you, and you are expected to deliver. Like you are expected to perform. And the same thing I see when like a startups like pitching constantly. That pitch becomes like a theater act in itself of like a 15, 20 minutes of three founders going back and forth in between,
Mm.
and it's like it's not like a new story. It's the same story mastered to the perfection, tailored for that delivery.
Yeah, that is true, of course, right? But here's the crazy thing, just to emphasize on what you're saying. What many people underestimate is how much your delivery can actually have an impact on the audience. So I give you one specific example: the voice. Now, if I say good morning, nothing happens. But if I say good morning, yeah, you're
And
laughing,
the
right?
radio voice, right?
With a radio voice, and I've also tried that in real life at reception counters and whatnot. I would get a positive reaction. I would get a smile from a person. So if you think about that, what am I doing? I am manipulating you to have a positive a positive emotion, to have a positive reaction to what I'm doing. So if you think about it, well, I can actually have a heavy impact on the way how you feel. And this is of course where it's important. So even if they deliver the same story, if they do it with the right delivery, it has an impact. But yes, it's the same story over and over again. However, and especially for founders, what I would say is why not mold it? Why not update it? Why not make it better? Make it change it around? I mean, for me, when I deliver my workshops, almost every time, it's not very efficient. I know, but almost every time I look again through my slides, I delete a few, I put in a new idea. I think like, oh, I found something better. I found somebody that inspired. I found a new video, and if you will go about stories from that point of view, it always becomes better. And for me, communication is not a journey where we go like, okay, I'm there. It's a never-ending journey, and that goes for both your content and your delivery. You should always strive to make it better, to strive to have more impact with the audience, because that's what you can really do.
Like I do agree, of course, but at this point of this conversation, I recently been to a conference where I listened to a lot of pitches.
Mm.
It was about like Web3 and blockchain, and there you have this like a two distinct set of the founders and creators. You will have this some, let's say, nerds who are like super technical, zero story. They built this very complicated technology, or at least they explain it the most complicated way possible. And then you will have this guy who is like, oh, this is an NFT. I don't know what it's gonna do. Give me 10 millions. We decide later. And we saw how that perfect storytelling ruined an entire industry and technology with NFTs coming and being sold for millions. That after 6 months today, now they worth literally nothing
Yeah.
because the technology was ruined by the some scammers or front runners, whoever are there, like this, who told the story, who took the money. And then you will have these great people who suffer, even though they were the smartest, they have the best ideas, they had zero delivery.
They had zero delivery, and most likely also they put their content in a way forward that the audience didn't really understand it. It was not created for the logic of the audience. It was created for the logic of the individual. They thought more about their own messages than they thought about the audience, and that's exactly the problem. I mean, last year I hosted with the Keen folks their Limitless Web3 conference, and David Vivancos, he's a keynote speaker, an entrepreneur, an AI researcher. He's a brain. He did a talk around AI where he had AI generated images that would constantly transform and change, and delivered his talk together with AI. It was mind blowing. I've never seen something like this. I was like, ugh. And this is also how you can speak about these topics. So therefore, what I would say is it's almost like everybody out there, if you're working in this space, don't deliver bad presentations, put in the effort, and that's important. So also that would maybe reduce the risk of people taking advantage through good story, through maybe even a good delivery, and then, everybody believes them because the education usually is not that great. If you want to understand about Web3, no, it's just like you're going down a rabbit hole and you're studying. You feel like, I just want to understand what an NFT is, but it's like, let me dig first and find that out.
And what do you think? Like, when is the best time for a company to hire a communication specialist?
Anytime. Anytime. I mean, you don't have to hire necessarily somebody full time, but if you think about it, I was just in Riyadh. I was working with graduates, and these graduates, all in IT, I gave them a bit of a hard time because I really wanted to push them. So we did 2 days of training, and then on the third day, I put them on a big stage in an auditorium. It was a bank, so therefore they had a nice and shiny auditorium and a professional stage, a microphone, and all of that. And I was actually shocked that I'd say about 30-40% of those ladies would feel insecure, would lose their train of thought, even though I gave them the opportunity to have notes. I really could feel how nervous it made them. And somebody from the academy would also come, so from somebody from the company. So the stakes were a little bit higher, but I wanted to give them that experience because if you get people out of their comfort zone, that's when you can grow, right? You can take now this experience that was not perfect and grow. So right from the beginning, you should invest in people. Mostly people will hire me to train the executives or to train the managers or the directors. But actually, everybody should have that skill of being a great communicator because you can only win.
And are we talking only about like a speech and delivery, or the communications also how you structure your thought?
Everything. It is everything, right? If you think even about the simplest tools, right? Very simple, like the opening, body, closing language. This is for me, opening, body, closing framework. This is for me a perfect example. In the corporate world, how do people end presentations? With, that's it. That's it. I mean, this is almost like you're just wasting air. You're not having a message. It is stupid to say that. I actually have the perfect word. What I always say is like, that's it. Put a little SH in the middle. What do you get? That's shh. I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it. No, no, no. But this is really what you get, right? And it doesn't have any value. So instead, shouldn't we have at the end of a conversation, at the end of a pitch, at the end of a speech, a conclusion, a message that the audience can remember? If they do conclusions, they do summaries that are that long. So again, nobody can remember it. So it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense.
True. But I think like that also was hugely impacted by the pandemic and this remote work where you have to let the audience that, okay, now you end it like okay, nothing from my side. I think that's another like a long, good sentence. Like,
no,
okay,
not
nothing
true.
from my side, that everyone else knows that, okay, they can, floor is open to.
It could be that it even got worse, but I had the slide already in 5 years ago, way before the pandemic. So that's it, is really how people in the corporate world would just wrap up their presentations. And I found this wonderful, really inspiring speech once from I believe it was an older professor from Stanford who said also that slide, for example, thank you or questions, is again stupid. And why is it stupid? Because there's no value. You put something that stays on the screen for 20 minutes up there and it has no value. So why not have something with a message, with a QR code, with a call to action, whatever you want to do? So yes.
I always thought about that. The last slide is the longest there.
Yes, it is.
And that slide is kind of a most important slide on your presentation. And yeah, whenever you have this smiley face and thank you to make it like, oh, cool. So it's totally waste.
It is a waste. Yes.
It's such a like a traumatic experience.
Yes. Yes.
So tell me about Toastmasters, because when I went to university, the university has this beautiful debate club, one of the best in the world, called Toastmasters. And I, in the beginning, naive me, thought it's about like making cheese and salami toast and it's about eating. And I was like, that must be like some extra curricular fun activity. But then I ended up knowing that it's about like toasting, cheers, saying, and in our culture, I'm from Azerbaijan, and in our culture, we have these long dinners where everyone is given an opportunity to speak and they have to say beautiful words to celebrate.
You have that in Azerbaijan as well?
Yes, to celebrate the host and how great they are, or celebrate the occasion. Like, what's the connection? Like, do you think it's still more about like baking and having that cheesy conversation, or it's more about really toasting? And what was your experience in that?
So first of all, I would say this about Toastmasters. I'm very grateful for what it has done for me. They are basically a membership organization that you can find all around the world. They have clubs, thousands of clubs all around the world. Dubai must have at least about 100 clubs or so. And they basically do two things. They focus on your communication skills, more verbally, orally and on your leadership skills. Now, the old program was really good because for me it was great. It was around communication and leadership, two separate tracks. Now they merged it into a new program, which I personally don't like so much because for me I was never that much interested in the leadership track. So it's now merged, but it doesn't still not matter. Toastmasters gives you an opportunity to go on stages in front of small audiences, 20, 30, 40 people, and deliver. And you can do that every week. If you want to do, you can join many clubs, you can do a speech every day. And whether it's a prepared speech, whether it is a just spontaneous speech, which they have also there, the impromptu speaking is really nice, the table topics, or you become a role player where you maybe then have to give a little speech about the grammar being used in the club or any mistakes being made or whatever. You have many speaking opportunities. So it's always good to work on your communication skills. So for me, it's great. Of course, what is maybe a little bit of the downside, when you get feedback, sometimes you will get feedback from people that are not that professional. So that can have an impact on yourself if you take that feedback not lightly. But overall, it's a fantastic platform. And if you don't find anything else where you can invest in your communication skills, I can highly recommend it.
That's
Highly.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. We talked like you like touched this point about like a grammar use or how complicated one speech should be.
Mm.
And I was reading this amazing article, and you mentioned Donald Trump, like how they were literally putting like a speech of every president and telling like, okay, what kind of vocabulary they use. And apparently
Mm.
Donald Trump used the like most simplistic vocabulary in there.
Mm.
And I also noticed that like whenever I'm in Dubai, I kind of choose the very basic words to be able to communicate with the masses, while when I'm in Britain, my vocabulary, even like my accent and everything like shifts drastically without me noticing, like the body.
Are you like, oi, mate?
Not that much, not that much. Like, where does it come? Well, like you coach, let's say leaders, and like, how do you choose your vocabulary, or what's the best golden kind of ratio in choosing that
Well,
word, syntax, grammar?
Well, I would say, first of all, you should always look at the audience. You should always look at the audience, and if, you're doing the right thing, right? Here in Dubai, we've got a very international audience. Almost nobody is a native speaker. The amount of native speakers is very low, so therefore, simple language is always winning. In general, I will always say that simple language is winning because yes, you can challenge Flo, but you can't challenge Albert Einstein, who said if you can't explain it simply enough, you're not doing a good job here. Similar to that. So therefore, it makes sense to be able to explain the most complicated subjects in simple language. Of course, when you go to the UK and you're speaking in front of a sophisticated, well-educated audience, then why not use a bit more complicated vocabulary? It makes sense. However, grammar, it's great if you can speak the perfect English, if you don't do any mistakes. But here's the truth. I made a job out of this, and I'm German. I do mistakes, and that's okay, because most of the conversations between people in English are actually done between non-native speakers. So therefore, it's all right.
It's all right.
It's all right.
And I worked in consultancy pretty long time, and I'm sure the consultants are known for wearing the tie and jacket,
Ooh.
even in 21st century, even in today. And it was always about how you present yourself professionally. In startup world, you'll see people literally changing the world and challenging the reality in a
Yes.
short and slippers. In that like big kind of a picture of perfect delivery and perfect message,
Mhm.
how much important is like person looks? Because apparently there was also the study that when two similarly qualified candidates come, beautiful person gets the job.
Well, we're naturally attracted to beautiful things. This is also what happens in nature. We're attracted to a flower or a beautiful scenery. This is really what happens. But for me, the biggest thing is that your fashion, your appearance communicates, whether you like it or not. It's a part of your communication. It's a part of your body language. So therefore, you can now either choose to not own this and give the power to the audience so they can judge you, or you can make a very conscious decision and say, I'm going to shape your perception of me with what I am wearing and how I'm appearing. And I have also done a little study for the last years. I always show two pictures of a people, of two of the same person. So it's a bold person with tattoos in a tank top.
Oh, I saw that. And
And
he's a doctor or
and exactly. So first I show that, and guess what everybody says? He is a truck driver, he's a drug dealer, he's a gang member, all of these bad things. And then maybe one in a group goes like, yeah, but he could also be a lawyer. That's one. While all the others go like, bad person. And then you show a photo in a coat, and everybody goes like, yeah, oh, that's true. He could also be that. So therefore you see that immediately you judge people. And there's so many studies where they say in the first 7 seconds,
implicit
they
bias.
judge you, whether they like you or not. So I will always say, you have an opportunity, why not use it? Especially as men, don't be lazy. I'm married Italian, so I'm grateful for that. I was trained for years, and I needed that training. But now I also get sometimes jobs because I am fashionable, and I also challenge the norm. When I go to corporates, I don't wear a suit like everybody else. I don't wear ties, but I wear something that is a suit, but it's definitely different. So it's a conversation starter. It makes me memorable and makes me stand out.
And what's your take on starting conversation or like a small talk? Because in Britain we talk a lot about weather that is always raining, and also like Americans do a lot small talk. But yeah, it's always like, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Like no one is, or like, how was your weekend? Especially when I first moved to Britain, first few weeks, I was like, how was your weekend? And of course I can't tell how was my weekend. It was great, but in a different sense. Then every like, Sunday I'm thinking, okay, what kind of story I have to tell? Like, oh, I had this beautiful, I watched this film. Like you have to kind of prepare for that small talk, or like have it in, what are like the best small talk or conversation starter for you?
Well, first of all, let me say this. You're touching on one of the most powerful techniques when it comes to public speaking and presentation skills. For me, it's something that I actually inherited from my mom. Shout out to you, mom. That's for you. She likes to talk to everybody. And I, over the last 5, 7 years, have also made this my own. Now, what does that for me? When I'm in the elevator and everybody goes like, oh, please don't talk to me. I don't want to engage right now. I'm like, hey, how you doing? I like this. How's the weekend? Whatever. So I engage with people. What does that do for me? Now, first of all, it trains me to connect with people in a very short amount of time. And I can leave it just with a small talk and say like, yeah, it's the weekend. Are you ready for it? Or I can also say then from there on, start a conversation that is richer. And as I train the skill, it also then, when I'm in front of an audience, immediately know how to build a connection with that. Or I can use it at an event where I have to present, to come early, talk to many people. So when I look at the audience, then I know this guy, I know this guy, I know this guy. So therefore, a group of strangers actually has a few friendly faces. So it's a great technique. And also, by you talking to many people, you can only leave it with a small talk, or you can take it further. And this is one of my favorite stories. Last year, I was going to host at Abu Dhabi Finance Week. In the morning, I go into the taxi. The taxi driver's name is Jangle. Like Jingle Bells, Jangle. So we already laughing, having a good time, chatting a little bit. He was, I think, from Ghana. And then he goes like, you know what, Flo? He's like, some people look at the world from a microscope, others from a telescope. You decide what you do. I'm like, wow, 8 o'clock in the morning, knowledge bomb on me from my taxi driver, Jangle, right? And this is what you can find out when you talk to many people. So it's a great skill. So how do you best do it? I mean, what's your secret? I'm sure you have one, no?
I honestly, because I think it's a very cultural aspect, like my secret is to compliment, because everyone loves compliment.
It works.
And in Azerbaijan, we say like, oh, I've been complimented many times, but all the time I thought that they could do better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You can never, overdo compliment, I guess. That's
Yes.
how I move forward, like complimenting someone's hair, dress, the way they look, the way they smile. Maybe they're not, but
Yeah.
like it kind of makes people feel closer to you.
I will disagree with you only with one small point. I will say it should be always an honest compliment, because then immediately the conversation can be richer. When you just do a compliment, then it's a little bit shallow. But if you find
I think it's
something
like
that you really like,
quick scanning, like, you have that like
Exactly.
1 second to find the best thing to compliment, right?
yes, yes,
And then it goes forward. Like, I think that my favorite compliment, if someone tells like, oh, seems you lost weight. You can never go wrong with it, like.
that's a good one. That's a good one. But there's so many other techniques, and people always think it's way too complicated. They overthink it. You can just walk up to somebody and say like, "Hey, how you doing today? What do you think about this and that? Did you get stuck in traffic?" And there you go. And for me, what I found out is I do this with everybody. I don't care whether you're the CEO, whether you're a minister. I'm like, "Hi," and then mostly I get a positive reaction. There's only a few people that will not have a positive interaction with you, and that's why it's a great technique.
I love like positive note, but you work with super influential people, businessmen, you coach them. How do you deliver the bad news? How do you tell them what they're doing wrong? Because not everyone likes criticism, especially when you are that powerful and coming and telling them, okay, you do that wrong in your speech. Don't put your hand there. Don't do that gesture. Like, do you do like a sandwich method or like what's your approach to telling people they're bad at something?
Well, Toastmasters does the sandwich approach. I I think it can work, but here's the truth. First of all, I'm very fortunate because when somebody already decides, no matter if it's a CEO, group CEO of a really large multinational company, they decide that we are talking eye to eye. So therefore, they give me that opportunity to give them very personal feedback, which I appreciate. But then for me, it's always about I see potential in people and I want to really help people to become better communicators so they can have more impact, have really better communication. It has an impact on their own lives. So therefore, for me, I always try to have feedback that is sometimes tough, but it always comes from the right place. It comes from a good place in my heart. And that's always the key for me, that you give constructive feedback and it's not just talking somebody down and go like, don't do this. It's really like, hey, you know what? There's an opportunity for you. You can continue to do that, but maybe you should try something. And also for me as a communication coach, I will never say to somebody like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. I will say, so I've observed these things and you've got these opportunities. Now, what you do is up to you. Same goes for when I tell and show you tools that you can use. Here are the tools. Now pick and choose what you like. So you don't become a robot. You are actually an individual that loves now the way how they communicate.
That's good. That's good. I think like yeah, when you put something onto like an opportunity stage where okay, this is the opportunity, this is the growth, and like that mindset, definitely it works. And on other cases, like if you just go tell like, okay, you are super bad, like you are actually not helping. Like you most probably, if someone hired you, they already know that they need to improve. The same way if you are at the doctor, unless it's a checkup, you know that
Sure.
something wrong is there. Like you better listen to the
That is true.
professional. I wanted to. I had a guest, beautiful guest here, and we were discussing about how AI can either build or ruin the implicit bias because there was a lot of studies when people with whiter names were getting a
Mm.
better opportunities because of it sounded white on their CVs, and
But that is changing. That is changing,
is
my
it?
friend. It is honestly, it is changing. I mean, I think I'm proof. I'm proof that I have been hired by companies to do talks around diversity. I've been hired by companies because they maybe needed somebody with my profile to represent them and not another old white person. So that is really changing, and also the cultural makeup of our countries are changing. I mean, in Germany, for example, I hosted a talk around diversity and inclusion, and in some areas they would already have 40 to 60% of people with migration backgrounds. So therefore, the culture is changing, and that's why. Yeah, there's a bit of shift, but I believe in AI. You can still find that bias also towards or against females.
But do you think that that bias that is already built in us, like how we can fight it? Because recently there was this huge Supreme Court case in US against Harvard University because Harvard and some other universities practice something called affirmative action,
Mm.
where in order to keep that diversity, they choose people from particular diverse backgrounds. And
Mm.
the same way as you mentioned, like you will be hired because you represent a certain diversity and they don't want to be all white. And unfortunately, the affirmative action was banned by the Supreme Court, and now university can't hire or can't strive to build that diverse class. Do you think like is it important to have this kind of pro diversity and make sure that there's a right mix or balance, or it should be pure meritocracy?
No, I think the more diverse it is, the better it is. And for me, something when you touch on it, that's my very personal opinion. When I always get to hear that we're all the same, I think that's almost stupid to say. I really think it's stupid to say because I don't look the same as other people. I really don't. And if I cannot embrace this, then this is wrong. So therefore, I come more from the train of thought that we are all different and we have to embrace it and we should all have the same opportunities. So, yes, you should build diverse teams because that helps you then to have different views and different trains of thoughts and different experiences that will give you, of course, a richer and better outcome.
But like, don't you think that in most cases, for example, at least in my opinion, like when people see me from Middle East, they want like a Aladdin story, or when they see like a black person, they want someone I don't know starving in Africa story rather than being modern, being like. Sometimes I think like the way you look kind of already sets the expectation of the topics you can talk about and you cannot talk about. The same way like when you talk, you're a Muslim, you're from Middle East, you kind of veto talking about women rights. While you can be a feminist.
You can, but I really believe you can play around with it so much. And I know that the second generation of the Turkish immigrants from in Germany, they also play around with that concept of this is who I am. So when I introduce myself, depends on the audience. I would very often say like, I'm German. Can you see that? Yeah. And it's like this old joke that I've used so often, but I just play around with it like because Germans typically wouldn't look like this, right? Or I love to say, very humbly, I am the best of two continents, Germany or Europe and Africa combined in one person here, right? Like I play around with these things and that gives it this unique perspective where then actually people are intrigued. They want to know more. So yes, it can maybe in a first instance put you into a bracket. And when people, for example, see me and I dress a little bit cool or quirky or whatever, they go like, are you an artist? Are you a DJ? Are you something like that? I'm like, no, not really.
You're a great DJ.
Yeah, but I'm not good with with beats. But yes, it of course, this is again appearance. So it has an impact on what people think about you. But then at the same time, you can put out great content and that then helps you to steer people in the right direction.
One important question, and that's why I kept it to the last. Communication and talking. How do you talk about taboo topics?
How do we talk about taboo topics?
Yes.
Do you want to give me an example?
Your approach is to be safer side, political correct side, or you believe that we have to go and solve it once and for all. And I can give an example, right? One of the biggest topic, in my opinion, was the abortion in US and Supreme Court and Roe case and all this, human rights. I don't know, like just because it was happening in one of the advanced economies and societies in the world, and I lived in US for some time. I have friends and that polarize kind of politics, and people just sometimes don't talk about the most important topic in family, in friend group, just not to hurt each other or fight or divide. While it's the most important topic. Like in my opinion, you have to talk about it everywhere all the time and not let it die. But just because it's taboo, you're not allowed to talk about it. It kind of fades away.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and I also have experienced that in my family and in work. So my take on this is, if you want to address such a topic, it's good if you do that because that can create great opportunities in whatever field, whether it's private or professional or even political. However, when you want to address a taboo topic, you really got to think about how you can do it, because if you just address it right away, many people shut down. So therefore, you got to find a common thread first. You got to find common grounds first, so we can establish that ground where we can talk about this taboo topic. If we don't do that, then most likely one party will just shut down and go into defense or offense, and the conversation is wasted. So therefore, you got to find the right angle for taboo topics. And when you do that, then there's this opportunity for growth. And that's not always easy. And depending on with whom you're talking to, and how opinionated people are, you maybe even need to lead up to that taboo topic, literally have a little communication strategy that you create for yourself so people can start thinking first, get other perspectives, hear, learn first about something before you go right away and attack. Because if you do that, then most likely it's not going to work.
Never attack.
Well,
Or you shall always attack first.
I, 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 I don't believe. I think there's a smarter way in doing things, and that's where let's go back to the topic that you chose, right, about abortion. If you just go ahead and you have two people, one says yes, the other one says no. They're very opinionated. One maybe does it for religious beliefs, the other one for whatever. You won't find common grounds. But if I now find stories about people that you emotionally connect with, that maybe make you tear, cry, that make you think, that challenge your belief system, then we can talk about, is this really the right thing to do, yes or no? And that's really what I would say about taboo topics. So yes, you can just go in and fight your way through, but it's going to be much more difficult.
And honestly, like more than taboo topic itself, I hate when people end it like, "Oh, we agree to disagree," and it's kind of put entire hours of conversation
Absolutely.
to the trash bin, and it's
Yeah.
like there's nothing can help. It's the same thing when people like, "I am XXX, but I am not racist, but," and then it ruins the entire 2 hours pre-speech. And I think
Absolutely.
it's kind of the way you build that communication. And that's why I was talking about like a sandwich method where actually this beginning and ending or toast and cheese is the most important in between.
Yes, and if you want to put it in the sandwich, I would go back to where we started actually. I would use here the power of stories. I would find the right stories, because through stories we can learn. Stories teach us. So therefore, this would be for me a great opportunity to find the right stories to make you really think about, is what I'm believing true when I'm seeing a story that I cannot deny. This is a fact. This is actually what happens, and I can find this proof around the world, and that's what can help me to support my case.
Perfect. And we are at the end of the conversation.
Oh
And instead of
no.
saying that's it, what would be your last sentence?
Well, my last sentence: invest in your communication skills, invest in your public speaking skills, whether you just watch YouTube and get inspired, whether you go to Toastmasters or whether you do small talk. Just invest in your communication skills and you can only win.
Thank you for the talk, Flo. And I was your host, Bugarusi.